right, it's the topic that just keeps on going and keeps on going, folks, and it never seems to, well, we lose it for a couple of days, and then it's back in the news cycle. That's right, folks, the one, the only, bike lanes. I get it that people are fatigued about talking about this, but look, folks, it's front and center, and it's what people are interested in for I guess, a variety of reasons. And the reason why it's back on the agenda today is because tensions continue to grow between Halifax councillors and the Premier. In a letter sent to Halifax Regional Council Wednesday night, Tim Houston says his government will be forced to act if council moves ahead with a recent decision making Morris Street in the downtown core into a one-way street in favor of bike lanes. Houston raises concern that the decision would worsen traffic congestion, create unnecessary public safety risk, and potentially impact operations at the port. Here's a quote. It says, as Premier, I have a responsibility to stand up for Nova Scotians who are concerned with ever-worsening traffic problems in Halifax. I won't stand by as decisions are made that will make their lives worse. In the letter, Houston says Bill 24 passed this spring by the provincial government gives government order-making decisions over municipal transportation projects. Another quote says, if HRM Council proceeds to make Morris a one-way street, the provincial government will be forced to act. The Premier is asking Council to advise on its decision by August 6th, which is the day after the next scheduled Council meeting. A few fundamental questions here that I think are important that I will ask you to weigh in on when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12 today. Do you support the Premier's intervention in municipal matters? Is it a dangerous precedent, perhaps? Even if you agree with him on this matter, you may say, yes, go, Premier. 100% agree with you on Morris Street and bike lanes and think that council's direction is adrift. But what is the precedent? Because guess what? He may intervene in something again that you don't support or that you don't agree with the Premier, and then you have a different opinion on it. So is this a dangerous precedent to have the Premier of this province get so directly involved in municipal matters? I'm not sure if this type of intervention has ever happened in the past. Not to my knowledge. It's certainly not since I've been around here. And, of course, this legislation, Bill 24, which was recently passed, as mentioned, gives him the opportunity and authority to do so. And so, again, do you support the Premier's intervention in municipal matters like this? And is it a dangerous precedent, even if you agree with him on the matter of Morris Street and bike lanes in general? And should the Premier perhaps have made this an election issue when campaigning? Should he have said when he was during the campaign, look, I want to pass a bill, if given a mandate to do so, which would involve me getting involved in overruling the council of the day at HRM? And why have bike lanes become such a controversial issue? Cost, congestion, what is it? The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, by the way, saw it on the CTV website this morning and saw the story yesterday on their newscast, calling on council to scrap its current bike lane project. Halifax City has turned this bike lane project into a bottomless pit, according to the Atlantic director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Says it's time to slam on the brakes on this bike lane boondoggle. A little history lesson. Council agreed in 2017 to have a 53-kilometer bike lane network completed by 2022. The cost at that time about $25 million, and most of that money was, and councillors often said on this show, look, it's money that's coming from the federal government primarily. So why not do it? It's basically free money. Well, that cost has ballooned to nearly $100 million now, at least, and that number will, I would suggest, go well above that when all is said and done. And none of that money to this point has been coming from any other source other than HRM directly. So this taxpayers will be on the hook for this massive oversurge in money. So do you agree with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation stance on this? And, of course, strong powers, I would say, are coming for sure. I would say it's a no-brainer. It's not a no-brainer. It's a done deal, I would say. That the provincial government, given the first opportunity, will amend the Halifax Charter and the provincial legislation, which will give the mayor of the day strong mayor powers. How far those strong mayor powers will go, we don't know exactly, because it'll be enshrined and in the language of the legislation. But I think we can assume that it's coming, based on reading the tea leaves, and based on what the Premier has said about it, and based on what Andy Fillmore has said about it. So these are other big issues that affect our municipality, folks, and these are things that I will ask you to weigh in on. Again, when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12, we've had some pretty deep conversations the last couple of days about homelessness and encampments, and get some calls from some people who are living in encampments and in some cases have been battling addiction. In one case, somebody who is recovering from addiction, currently dealing with that, and quite candid in his comments about lived experience. And again, the homelessness situation is something else you can continue to talk about, and encampments, and what can we do about that. Again, these are deep issues here impacting our region and our not just, by the way, not just HRM. This is happening right across the province and across the country. And I would say across the Western world. You talk to people in other countries and the UK and other places, and it's a similar thing. So it's not a phenomenon that is unique to this area, that's for sure. So again, some other things that you can talk about, whatever else you'd like to get into, we will open the phone lines, as I mentioned, between 11 and 12. Hope to hear from many of you at that time. All right, joining us now is Kevin Russell, Executive Director, Rental Housing Providers, Nova Scotia. Kevin, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Well, Todd, thanks for inviting me on.
Okay, so wanted to talk to you about a release. Time for Houston government to clean up regulators' conflict on Halifax Water case. So what's this all about? Give us the details.
Well, Todd, Halifax Water has applied for a 34% rate increase over 2 years. And HRPNS is intervening due to the financial impact on rental housing providers and tenants. And Bruce Fisher, a former HRM finance official, sits on the utility review panel board, and he's reviewing the case. And Mr. Fisher is an HRM pensioner. He advises Halifax Water finances and has refused to recuse himself despite apparent conflicts. And Todd, regulatory decisions must be impartial and free from real or perceived conflicts of interest. So that's where we're at the moment.
Okay, so tell us about. So what would you like to see then? I guess when it comes to this change, you just basically what you're looking for is him to recuse himself. That's what you're looking for, right?
That's exactly what we're looking for. The stakes are high for renters and homeowners, and actually for commercial businesses to ignore this conflict. And we like to see that the government will use the authority under the Utility and Review Board Act to remove Mr. Fisher from this specific case.
Okay, so tell us about the what you're appealing in the first place, or the 34% water rate increase. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's water is a major expense that happens that impacts both owners and operators of buildings, plus the renters, because it's a big expense, and expenses flow through to rent, so eventually it will impact renters, and so we see this as a big decision, and it should be free from any real or perceived biases. And Mr. Fisher's rationale for remaining on the board is rooted in a narrow legal test for bias. he decided that because no one proved he holds a fixed opinion or direct financial interest, he can remain on the case, even though we highlighted the appearance of partiality due to Mr. Fisher's longstanding ties to HRM and involvement in policymaking affecting Halifax Water. And those were dismissed because they did not meet the legal threshold. The troubling part of this process is that Mr. Fisher made the ruling himself, and it was based on his own interpretation of the law and facts. There was no independent assessment, outside review of the appearance of conflict. And while we respect the rule of law, public trust is just as important. And and this is about confidence in the regulator's independence, not just technical compliance with legal standards. I mean, does this open the door for situations where you can have former Emir executives to rule on Nova Scotia power rates, or former oil executives to rule on gas prices? When regulators interpret conflict of interest so narrowly that only a smoking gun disqualifies them, public confidence gets left behind. So we like to see the province get involved in this and correct this situation.
Okay, well, tell me. So how might he benefit financially? I'm not that part. I'm not really quite sold on.
Well, Mr. Fisher has a pension from the from HRM, and part of the application progress has to do with returns to HRM to their dividend that must be paid by Halifax Water to the city. So there is a clear reference that to maximize the benefits to HRM at the expense of water rates. So we're concerned about that. So we think that to clear the air, that Mr. Fisher should be recused from the decision making.
How many people sit on this appeals board?
There's, I believe, there's 3 others that are on the appeal board, and we did our due diligence and looked at the other board panelists, and that's when we discovered the conflict with Mr. Fisher.
Okay, so I wonder why they would hire somebody who's in a conflict anyway, or a potential conflict with these types of issues.
Well, Mr. Fisher has qualifications. There's no doubt about that. We're not arguing about this. This is about conflict of interest, not qualifications. It just is to do with this specific case where it does deal with Halifax Water rate increases, and we think it'd be best just to have the air cleared and make sure that there's no biases creeping into the decision-making process. All
right. So has the 34% water increase, when is that scheduled to kick in?
Well, the hearing for this increase is scheduled for September 15th, and we're there as a number of other stakeholders, high volume water users that will be appearing before the panel and requesting that Halifax Water defend their increases. And I should add that even the city of Halifax is will be at the intervener status meeting, and they're looking for approval of the increase. So there's another conflict, and they'll be appearing before a former employee.
Okay, so if in fact this kicks in, would rental property owners not be able to pass that on to their renters? That
will happen. It's an operating expense, and operating expenses eventually will find their way into the rents, because rents cover the cost of operating expenses. So the 34% is a substantial increase, and we're at we always hear about housing affordability, and our biggest drivers of rent are utilities and government taxes and fees. And so, but yet our members get pinpointed as the ones that are causing the rent increases, and all we're doing is passing along the expenses that are coming down from government and from the utility companies.
And of course, with the rent cap, this is perhaps another example that I'm sure that you would cite as being problematic when it comes to trying to recoup money under a rent cap situation.
Yeah, no question, Todd. That is a big issue for rental housing providers. I mean, 98% of revenue is generated from rent. So you need sufficient rent to be able to pay your bills. Our bills come due on the first of the month, and if we don't pay them, if we don't pay the power company, if we don't pay the gas company or the oil company, the bill, the accounts are shut down until the situation is rectified. We can't afford to have, not to be able to have sufficient funds to pay the bills.
All right, Kevin, listen, appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this today.
Not a problem, Todd. Always a pleasure, and have yourself a good day.
All right, take care. Kevin Russell, Executive Director, Rental Housing Providers of Nova Scotia. Road safety laws lag adoption of personal e-bikes and e-scooters, according to CAA. We'll get into this when we come back. As sales of electric bicycles and scooters rise across this country, a new study released by the Canadian Automobile Association, of course, CAA, reveals gaps in safety regulations, data collection, and public awareness, while also noting that shared mobility fleets operate with stricter rules and can be a positive example for change. Joining us to discuss all of this is Julia Kent, Director, Advocacy and Community Relations, CAA Atlantic. Julia, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Happy to be here.
All right, so why is now the time to commission this study, by the way?
Well, as you said, the adoption of e-bikes and e-scooters is really convenient, accessible, affordable when we look at car prices right now. So the adoption is really moving at a very fast pace. So fast, in fact, that it is outpacing jurisdiction and government's ability to have safety parameters in place and to consider road safety and the safety of Atlantic Canadians as they make decisions. So that's lagging. So now was the time to create a study like this with the Traffic Injury Research Foundation so that we could really speak to the jurisdictions and governments and give them the tools and data that they need to make informed decisions.
Okay, and what are some of the more interesting findings here?
Well, the study was fascinating because it really looked at all of Canada and every government and municipality in Canada and what they're currently doing, but it also looked at European jurisdictions that have seen success in the micro-mobility e-bike and e-scooter world and made comparisons and recommendations on what could be done. But first and foremost, what we found was collision data is inconsistent and often missing key details in Canada. And so a lot of reports lack specific information about incidents involving an e-bike or an e-scooter. So they're misclassifying those incidents as pedestrian incidents. So many jurisdictions are just missing the data they need to make informed decisions around e-bikes and e-scooters. The other thing that we found is that shared use fleets, so public e-bike or e-scootered share programs, they often abide by stricter regulations and safety measures than personal devices that we would have at home. They have things like geofencing, speed limits, higher minimum age ride. So they are definitely the safer group right now, and there's a lot to be learned from them. There's a need for continued public education. So safety information and guidance on these things is very limited. And as a leader in road safety advocacy, CAA is providing a lot of that information on our website, but there really is a public awareness piece about the safety rules that needs to be done all across Canada. And really one other concern we had, and it's been in the news a lot lately, is there's been battery and modification risks with these e-bikes and e-scooters. So uncertified imports of lithium-ion batteries and speed alterations are increasing the risk of fire and injury hazards, more so for personally owned devices. So operating high operating standards will avoid these potential risks with shared fleets, but for personal use, we're seeing a lot more of it. So those are some of the findings from the study.
Okay, when it comes to these shared use fleets, these are for-profit, obviously, operations, and why do you think that they are on more up to date with regulations and personal advice, or rather restrictions?
Well, the e-bikes, for example, the Canadian e-bike market is currently valued at about $240 million. And, they're going to reach about 100,000 units sold this year in 2025. So it's a big market. So they have been looking at other jurisdictions, those private companies, for a long time, primarily in Europe, who have seen success in this realm. So we don't have equivalent numbers on the e-scooter market, which we're seeing really take off, especially in Atlantic Canada. But you might notice, like in Halifax, Bird Canada, which is the country's largest e-scooter provider, they've recorded a milestone of 4 million kilometers ridden this year. So the average ride is about 6 kilometers each. So that's pretty major since the company's inception just in 2019. But they are looking to other companies across the pond or elsewhere in the world, and a lot of them are basing their safety standards on what has been successful in other regions and what rules exist in other jurisdictions.
All right, so because you put in a credit card and there's the governors on them, I suppose, why fundamentally are they safer? Are they able to track whether drivers are on sidewalks, or what are the reasons why they're doing it better?
Well, they have rules, right? So I think part of the issue is that governments and jurisdictions simply don't have rules or have inconsistent rules. So, For example, some jurisdictions might have a mandatory helmet use or a minimum age rider of, say, 16 years old. Another jurisdiction might not have those rules at all in place yet. They may be talking about those, or, it's very difficult for these jurisdictions and the governments to even define what is an e-bike or an e-scooter currently, because Transport Canada many years ago was actually looking at that, but somewhere down the line, they actually abandoned that project for whatever reason. And it's because there's really some finite details that define these devices. For example, an e-bike that has a throttle in some jurisdictions can be considered a motorcycle. So it's fuzzy. There's a line to walk there, and it's not totally clear to governments, which is why I think they haven't had these rules in place. But to your point about why are shared fleets doing it better or doing it safer, it's because they have more control. They have more ability to control, right? So they can control who puts their credit card in, how old that individual is, or what have you. And there's penalties, and they can enforce. You can't use the scooter without a mandatory accompanying bike helmet. And they have things like geofencing, like I mentioned. So they can set parameters where this scooter is not going to work if you leave this geographical area. This scooter is not going to work at that high of a speed. They can do all those sorts of things. So I really think it's largely about control when you're talking about shared fleets, public fleet use like that.
Okay, the Canadian Institute for Health Information released new data today that shows between 2022 and last year, e-scooter-related hospitalizations of kids and teens increased by 61%. So this kind of speaks to the importance of what your release is getting into, right? The time and
exactly.
quite timely, right?
Oh, it's very timely. And anecdotally, we hear ERs across the country are reporting insane amounts increases of injuries related to e-scooters and e-bikes. And there's two things that I want to mention there. So our study actually found that the predominant amount of collisions or injuries that are happening with these e-bikes and e-scooters are happening on sidewalks. So many jurisdictions have clued into that, and they have banned those devices from sidewalks. And one of our recommendations in the study is that jurisdictions actually define where these devices are allowed to ride, and that is safer for all road users. And the other thing I was going to say is that the injuries that we see related to e-bikes and e-scooters are not unlike those that we have seen historically and continue to see with cycling. So they're injuries to the torso, arms, neck, face. However, these e-bikes and e-scooters can ride so much faster than a regular bicycle, so they are much more severe when we're looking at the injuries. So it's very serious, and it's really to the benefit of all road users, not just those on e-bikes and e-scooters.
All right, if people want to know more about this, they can check out your release. It's all on your website, correct?
It's all on our website, and a link to the full report with the Traffic Injury Research Foundation is there. And I urge governments, hopefully this is going to be what they need to really put those rules in place to keep everyone safer on the road this summer.
Okay, Julia, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Julia Kent, Director, Advocacy and Community Relations, CAA Atlantic. And we'll talk about the latest when it comes to tariffs with Moshe Lander when we come back. All right, Moshe Lander joins us, economist from Montreal's Concordia University. Moshe, thanks for joining us. As always, we appreciate it.
Good morning.
All right, so when it comes to tariffs, and it just seems to me that it's hard to keep track of what's going on, at least for me anyway. I don't know. I'm not even sure if it's hard to keep track. It's hard to stay interested in it, I suppose, when the goalposts are always changing and what's going on with Donald Trump is ever changing as well. What are your thoughts on Canadians and their attention to this tariff story, which is critically important, and at some point, well, it's already impacting Canadians and businesses, but it could, as it expands, its reach could be much more deep. So, what are your thoughts on Canadians and their attention to this story?
Well, I think there's two aspects to it. One is that this is the strategy. It's that hopefully at some point we just give up. We were really angry when the tariffs first came and all of the elbows up talk and I'm never going to buy American again. And then at some point you just kind of resign yourself to it. And if the negotiating strategy is that the U.S. is willing to play the long game where Canada is not, then yes, eventually we'll capitulate. And even the Prime Minister acknowledged yesterday that we're probably going to end up a deal that has tariffs involved in it. I think the second aspect to it is that, not to sound old, but the 21st century mindset of most Canadians is not to think macro in any aspect of their lives. Forget economics. It's to think micro. And so when you and I have talked about inflation or recessions, that doesn't resonate with Canadians because they're mostly looking at their phone and their social media, and they're saying, if I don't see it in my small circle of friends, then it's not happening. And so I think it's the same thing here, that whether we're talking about tariffs and what the impact on people's lives are, until it actually invades their lives, they're saying, whatever, it's not part of my life.
All right, so currently right now, what is tariffed, what is not tariffed? Like, kind of give us an overview as to the broad strokes of what's going on here.
I agree with you. It's hard to keep track of everything, even if you are paying attention to it. So yeah. There's the tariff on steel and aluminum. That's around 25%. There's the 10% tariff that's on energy. There's the tariff that could be coming in on August 1 that's on copper. That's allegedly at 50%. Anything that's not CUSMA compliant is allegedly going to have a 35% tariff applied to it beginning August 1. And that's mostly the highlights there. Of course, within the current CUSMA agreement, there is the provision for tariffs to exist on some goods, but those are mostly small, and they've always been there over the last 30 years. We've just never really paid attention to them. All
right. How about counter tariffs? Where are we with that?
Counter tariffs are very, very small and very, very mild. For the most part, Canada has taken the appropriate response from an economic standpoint, which is not to tariff too much going back. There was some consideration as to whether to escalate on some of those counter tariffs, but the realization, of course, among the Canadian negotiators is that counter tariffs will be counterproductive, and they will just land on Canadian consumers even faster than the damage that American tariffs on Canada will impact the local economy. Keep in mind that the theory is supposed to be that if America puts tariffs on Canada, those tariffs either land on American consumers or Canadian producers. There's really nothing there that's supposed to land on Canadian consumers unless the Canadian producers pass those tariffs on to Canadian consumers as a way to try and make up for lost business. But if Canada puts tariffs on the U.S., it's either going to land on American producers or Canadian consumers, and we all know which one of those is going to have the bargaining power and where it's really going to land up then. So that's why the Canadian government has been very slow to push back. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of recognizing that this is an own goal and it's really not worth doing.
Okay, diversifying markets. Are we successful in so far in trying to diversify markets and find other markets?
In the most recent trade data, we did see that exports to countries outside the U.S. were up about 5%. That's a success story. No free trade agreements, though, exist at this point since these tariffs have started. There is a free trade agreement in principle with the European Union, but 10 parliaments in Europe have yet to ratify it because they're upset about Canada's supply management policies. The same thing that Donald Trump is upset about, the same thing that previous American governments have been upset about. And because those parliaments won't ratify it, the free trade deal hasn't come into place. Free trade deals don't happen that quickly, not at least in a voluntary sort of way. So I don't expect that anything is really going to come of it. In terms of trying to pursue foreign markets, if you cut the U.S. out of the deal and you look at a map, Canada is now completely waterlocked. And so if you're going to sell any goods to the rest of the world, you're going to have to negotiate one ocean at a minimum. That raises substantially the cost. And in Europe or in Asia, there's probably going to be existing companies that can compete with Canada. And the natural resources that would be the natural things that we would export become really expensive once you factor in the transportation cost.
Okay, so when it comes to energy exports, and there's a lot of talk about the pipelines, and what are your thoughts on momentum for pipelines and Energy East in particular with all of this? Because as we already discussed, it was when it was really topical and people were upset, there was a sense of urgency, and it falls out of the news cycle, and suddenly so did the talk of pipelines.
Right, and the realization is that even with the fast tracking of the bill that the Parliament passed last month, you can fast track a pipeline as much as you want. You still have to build it, and that's years, if not decades, in the making. And that's assuming that there's no surprises along the way: Indigenous groups, lawsuits, or weather disruptions even. So it's not something that's going to happen for years to come, even if the government were shovel ready, which of course they're not. And so it's one of those things, again, where when you and I have talked about, for example, interest rate changes, there is this mindset among Canadians that the Bank of Canada changes interest rates and we should see the results the next morning. That takes 18 to 24 months before it works its way through the economy. You can imagine that that's just pulling a lever, changing the interest rate. What do you think it's going to do to create pipelines and actually onboard them? Probably by the time that we get to it, Canadians will have completely lost interest. So the government was completely in a no-win situation there, that even if the momentum had been there, that momentum would ebb as it takes years and years to see progress.
Right. When it comes to response and elbows up, as you mentioned, one of the things that I think has kind of stuck is Canadians not wanting to travel to the United States. I hear anecdotally that and statistically in some cases that the numbers are way down when it comes to border states and typical locations where Canadians generally go in the summer months. So that is something that I think Canadians have kind of made their viewpoint heard by not traveling to the United States.
Yeah, and add me to that list. That is actually the extent of my protest with these tariffs, is that I'm not traveling to the U.S. and living in Montreal part of the year and living in Calgary part of the year and living in Halifax part of the year. Going to the U.S. was a regular part of my travel plans for vacation. I'm sitting out the next 1,300 days as well. You're right. It's not just anecdotal. It is in the statistical evidence. But, of course, the other thing that we need to see is 6 months from now when the winter comes, how many of our snowbirds are going to be able to withstand that temptation, especially if they're owning property down in the U.S. It's one thing if you're renting property and you say, well, I'm just not going to rent this year. But if you actually own that property, are you prepared to let it sit empty for 3 years? It's very unlikely. So I think at some point we might see that this weakens as well. But certainly the Americans are realizing that Canadians make up a large part of their tourist trade, and they've reached out to Canadians in a variety of advertising campaigns saying, please come back. The policies of the White House do not reflect our policies, and we'll be happy to have you. But I think Canadians are legitimately not just upset, but there is a worry. We hear these occasional horror stories of what happens to Canadians when they get to the border, and the risk of detainment or exported to some prison, even though it's a highly, highly unlikely outcome, has highly, highly damaging effects if it happens. And I think when people are doing the expected value calculation, they're saying, it's just not worth it.
Is the U.S. economy feeling tariffs at this point? And I suppose it would be, but to a degree that it's making a difference, moving the needle, I guess, when it comes to business and their influence and farmers or whatever. Is that happening in the United States to the point where it should potentially be felt in Washington?
They are seeing it, but they're not. Remember that these tariffs take time to work their way through. Remember that before the tariffs came in, Canada, among other countries, massively increased their exports into the U.S. merely as a means to try and beat the taxes that were coming. The U.S. is showing signs of a little bit of strain. It'll take time before it fully starts to show the damage that's being done. You can maybe watch as a proxy that Donald Trump has been leaning on the chair of the Fed, his friend, no less, Jerome Powell, to cut interest rates. Partly that's a belief that the U.S. has tamed inflation, which they haven't. But part of it is also a fear that the U.S. economy is going to soften. And like I said a few minutes ago, if it takes about 18 to 24 months for monetary policy to work its way through the economy, Trump realizes, or at least his people around him realize, that this is going to have a damaging effect at some point. So he's putting pressure on the Fed, start cutting rates now. Jerome Powell has actually shown himself, though, to be a rather good chair of the Fed and is withstanding the political pressure as any good central banker should, and follow what's best for the economy. And right now, like you said, the data isn't really showing the signs of strain, and so he's withholding, especially because inflation is not under control the way that Trump is texting out.
Moshe, always great. Appreciate it. We'll do it again. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, take care. Moshe Lander, economist from Montreal's Concordia University. Some high praise accolades for the tourism sector here in Nova Scotia. We'll get to that when we come back. Ross Jefferson, President and CEO of Discover Halifax, joins the show. Ross, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Oh, great to be back with you, Todd.
All right. So in a recently published Travel and Leisure World's Best Awards for 2025, it's some good news for the province and the city, right?
Yeah, we were named here in Halifax as one of Canada's 5 favorite cities in 2025. So it's great recognition for us.
Okay, so tell us about this publication and how well read it is and its reach.
Yeah, absolutely. So Travel and Leisure magazine, it's a monthly travel and lifestyle magazine. They've got about 5 million readers. They're a really well-established, long-standing magazine, 50 years of history. They target specifically luxury and experience-seeking travelers. The magazine is well known for its annual World's Best Awards, and this is one of the categories that Halifax was nominated and won in. Each year, the readers share their experiences from their travels, and they have this past year they had 657,000 votes cast. So a really wide reach, a lot of people engaged in this, the world's best contest, and wonderful to see the progress here in Halifax and in Nova Scotia.
Okay, and I suppose we don't know statistically how this might materialize into additional people coming to the city and to the province, but we know that it's, well, perhaps we do know. What can you tell us?
Well, look, obviously the recognition is twofold, really. Specifically in their publications and the awards, we're getting recognition. But it's also a great testament that we'll use. But I think more importantly, I think it's really motivating for everyone here in this community, in the industry, and all the partners. What was particularly nice about this award is that we've had a stated goal here and our vision is to make Halifax everyone's favorite Canadian city. So the fact that we've just been recognized by this particular magazine as one of Canada's favorite cities, it's a wonderful testament, I think, to the work the entire industry is trying to do here.
Okay, what can you tell us about numbers and people visiting so far this summer? And I'm assuming that because many people are deciding to do staycations and visit throughout the country, that many people visiting perhaps from other parts of the other provinces. What can you tell us about traffic and trends so far this summer?
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. We've been on a long-standing growth trend here in Nova Scotia and in Halifax. We've had actually, with the exception of COVID, of course, we've had 10 consecutive years of growth. We're up about 20% over the last decade in the number of visitors. Obviously, lots of investment by the private sector in new hotels and new restaurants and new experiences. A lot of more shows, concerts, and things that are coming on here. So it's a growth industry. We've always expected this. The circumstances this year with our big partner to the south of us, we know that a lot more Canadians are deferring their travel from the U.S., and it is impacting travel in Canada. It's impacting us. We're at an all-time high right now for visitation. In fact, we're almost at capacity as we enter into the summer. It is getting a little bit difficult to get rooms, so we're encouraging everyone that's coming or wants to come to plan early, to book early, and to shop around, get their best deal as well. So it's a great looking picture for the industry. It's really great here in Atlantic Canada and here in the HRM region. It's been going exceptionally well.
And I would think that would make it more expensive for hotels. Obviously, it's supply and demand, right?
Yeah, that is the downside, supply and demand and the prices for hotels. Of course, the prices for everything in the country we know are going up, but it certainly does put pressure on that right now. But we do also continue to see interest in building more hotels, and that balance will come back around. We'll have more availability, reasonable prices. But I think I should note, too, that while the prices are still, they have gone up here, we're still very cost effective compared to traveling in the rest of the country. In many cases, we're half the price of some of the destinations right now in the city. That it is getting expensive to travel because demand is picking up all across the country.
Okay, and how about the capacity for restaurants? And we know that the restaurant industry has struggled, but what can you tell us about the restaurant component to all of this and its addition to providing a great experience for people visiting our city?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a whole brand new portfolio of restaurants that open up. Of course, we see a number of them that will close or renovate and change their models as well. We know it's a tough industry. Costs are going up for that industry. Finding talent and labor in that industry can be challenging. But we've seen a strong recovery, I think, in that industry. There's lots of options. It's not. It is still a city that you've got to make a reservation for, and we encourage our visitors to do that when they're trying to pick the restaurants that they want to go to. But all in all, I think you can still get availability. You have to do a little bit more homework, but there's some great experiences here, and in fact, the culinary part of this region is what attracts a lot of people as well. So we're really fortunate to have a strong restaurant industry, a strong experience industry, and a great portfolio of events that are still going on this year. Things that have been happening in the Garrison grounds. We've got the great outdoor comedy festival coming up, Shindig coming up the grounds. We've got Rock the Harbor at Alderney Landing, and later on in November, the Canadian curling trials. So Still a lot on the calendar and a lot of reasons to come, and it's definitely we're expecting this to be another great year.
Yeah, it seems like every weekend there's something. We get Pride this weekend. We have Jazz Fest. It just seems to me that there's no shortage of events and things to do here in the city, which is great.
Yeah, one of the things that we know people have said that if they're going to cut back on the discretionary spending, they didn't want to cut back on travel. So we're encouraged by that, and we definitely see it in the numbers right now.
Okay, Ross, thanks. Sounds like it's a good time to be in your industry.
It is great. Thanks. Great to speak with you, Todd.
Okay, take care. Ross Jefferson, President and CEO of Discover Halifax. All right, folks, we got some time for you. What is on your mind today? The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Perhaps you've heard some things talked about on the show of this week that you'd like to chime in on or have your say, or perhaps things that you've agreed with or disagreed with. That's what it's all about. Also, tensions continuing to grow between Halifax councillors and the Premier. In a letter sent to HRM Council last night, Tim Houston says the government will be forced to act if Council moves ahead with a recent decision making Morris Street in the downtown core into a one-way street in favor of bike lanes. So that is something that I think is worthy of talking about for sure. Do you support the Premier's intervention in municipal matters in overruling Council? And perhaps is this a dangerous precedent? Be careful what you wish for, right? Because you may agree with the Premier on this and say, yes, that's great, intervene, we need it. But then he may intervene again down the road in something that you don't agree with. And then suddenly democracy is at risk and all that goes with it. So what's your take on this story or anything else you'd like to talk about? Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Oepn Hour, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, time to take your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Give us a call. What is on your mind today? What would you like to get into? Perhaps you've heard some things that you've agreed with. Perhaps you've heard some things that you've disagreed with. That's all good. Let's have a chat. 902-405-6000. One of the stories that certainly caught my attention today on what is a pretty slow news day, I must say. But that's to be expected in July, in the hazy days of July. But tensions are growing between Halifax councillors and the Premier. In a letter sent to Council Wednesday night, Tim Houston says his government will be forced to act if Council moves ahead with a recent decision making Morris Street in the downtown core into a one-way street in favor of bike lanes. Houston raises concern that the decision would worsen traffic congestion, create unnecessary public safety risks, and potentially impact operations at the port. He says as Premier, he has a responsibility to stand up for Nova Scotians who are concerned with ever-worsening traffic problems in Halifax, and says he won't stand by as decisions are made that will make their lives worse. So what are your thoughts on this, folks? Is this a good thing or a bad thing that the Premier is going to intervene in a matter which is in Council's purview and jurisdiction completely at this point? And this Bill 24, which passed in the legislature in the spring, gives the Premier the authority to do this, not suggesting that he doesn't have it. But is it potentially a bad precedent to have the Premier so involved in matters of a municipality? Again, this is council that has been elected by members by residents in the city. And for the Premier to unilaterally come in and step in and overturn decisions made by council, whether you agree with it or not, is that a dangerous precedent? Is that concerning to you? That is one of the fundamental questions that I think we need to address here. Again, whether you agree with him or not, is it a dangerous precedent? 902-405-6000. Len, hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi there.
Todd, I just like to give my two opinions, and I'll let you go, because I know there's a lot of other callers want to make their opinion. I think the Premier has all the right to do the right thing that's going to help the people of Halifax, especially control congestion. And I think I used to live in the South End one time, and making Moore Street a one-way street just to put bike lanes in is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. These councillors that we have voted in to do these rules and make these laws, what did they do before they became a councillor? Were they engineers? Were they, people involved in making suggestions? Good suggestions in order to control traffic control. And what they're doing is 100% wrong. And the other thing I just want to mention to you, Todd, is I was talking to a couple of councillors the other day. Not mention any of their names because it doesn't matter, because we know what's going on between the councillor and the mayor himself. And they tell me they're not getting along with our mayor. Now, what a situation this is right now, when the mayor and the councillors are not getting to go along with each other. That they're against, the councillors are against the mayor. They're sorry that he is really the mayor of Halifax. And I think that's terrible that these adults, can't get along with each other in running our city. And that's all I've got to say, is that I'm very disappointed. I think if there was an election coming up for councillors in this city right now, a lot of these councillors would lose their jobs, and which would be totally right, because some of them don't belong in there. And you have a good day. All
right, Len, take care. Listen, when it comes to is somebody an engineer making decisions, or look, that's the case with everybody who's elected. For the most part, they're making decisions based on things that they don't have any expertise on. That's the nature of generally of politics. To my knowledge, Premier Tim Houston is not an engineer, does not have a civics background. As a matter of fact, I know he's not. He was an accountant, and that's his background. So why if that's going to be the argument that council is not making good decisions because they're not qualified without proper designations to weigh in on, well, that's impossible to have that expectation, in my opinion. 902-405-6000. I think fundamentally, again, I happen to agree with the Premier on this, by the way, that I don't think Morris Street should be turned into a one-way street to make way for bike lanes. But that isn't fundamentally what the issue here is. To me, is this a dangerous precedent that is being set, that the Premier of this province is stepping into municipal affairs in this way? Is it an overreach? That's the question. And again, if you agree with him, then it's easy to default to, yeah, I like it. But what's next? That's the question that I'd like to ask. 902-405-6000. Ifo, hello. Hi, Ifo.
Hello. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Cool. I called to talk about the African Festival. But before I say that, I would just say I agree with you 129%, maybe even 1,000%. It's about fundamentals of democracy. And sometimes people forget that, it's awesome when you give a dictator all the power until the dictator doesn't do what you like. Right. Then all of a sudden you're like, what are we going to do? Yeah. So it's best to have balance. But I came to talk about a joyful thing. Today, 4 o'clock, the African Festival of Arts and Culture annual, this is, I think, a 15th year festival, is happening at the Halifax waterfront, just by the big blue wave. At 4 o'clock, it's when it opens up, and it's 4 days. It goes till Sunday. Yours truly will be opening it up with some drumming and storytelling. So bring your friends, bring your enemies. Maybe you'll become friends after you hear my beautiful story. So show up and come enjoy. It's cheaper than getting a flight to Africa. You only have to come to the Halifax waterfront. 4 days of fun. That's what I called to talk about.
Okay, awesome stuff. Thanks, Ifo.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. Rick, hello.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Good. I just want to weigh in here about the councillors in the bike lanes. I mean, they're spending money on bike lanes, and the bikes contribute nothing to the city, not 1 cent of tax. And they're going to spend $100 million of our money. Like, that's just ridiculous. And Tim Houston, he's doing a great job, and stepping in and putting these people in their place is great. And I also think that the mayor should have, an extra power where he can walk in, and if he had to fire the CAO, right now he can't do that. He's a lame duck, and I believe that he should have those powers.
Rick, many of those bicycle owners would be property owners, and they'd be paying property tax, would they not?
Yes, they would, but they don't pay 1 cent on road tax.
No, but again, you say that they don't provide any money to the scenario, but they would through their property tax to a degree, at least, right?
Yeah, to a degree, but I'll tell you, not to the amount of money that proportionately for the amount of bikes that are driving in the city. And secondly, if they're going to drive on the pavement, it doesn't matter, and we're going to modify the pavement and so on and so forth, then they should be paying a tax, period. It's just like everybody else. They're no different.
Okay, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Fred, hello.
Good morning, Todd. My tongue for about 6 days ever since Dan Alstrand said our last election was basically giving approval or lack of approval of bike lanes. I'm a proponent of bike lanes, or at least I was during the election, until all of a sudden the price tag went to $100 million. I turned, and it's going to be more. I personally feel that the reason all this is happening is we have a series of councillors that do not listen to their constituents. And because they don't listen to their constituents, we have to turn around to the next order of business, which is bugging the mayor, saying we don't agree with our councillors that are sitting on that seat. And he's hearing it from not 10 people or 100 people, but thousands of people, where he wants to say, well, let's just take a break and look at this thing. And subsequently, that hasn't worked. So what have the people done? They've gone to the province. And you don't get Tim Houston's attention by 10 or 100 or 1,000 people. It's when his phone doesn't stop ringing continuously all day and all night about this situation in the one-way street. Is it a dangerous precedent to have this? Yes, but when you don't have the councillors listening to their constituents or saying, I'm going to take my tools and go home if this comes to whatever fruition, that the mayor gets a few extra powers to do his job, that kind of tells you where we're at right now in the political scene in Halifax.
Well, okay, Fred, appreciate the call. And look, I agree. Obviously, the Premier thinks that he's got public backing on this. Otherwise, he wouldn't be doing it. So there's no doubt that's at play. I mean, if nobody was talking about this and nobody cared and there was no backlash, then the Premier would not get involved. But that said, what about the next issue that the Premier gets involved in? Is it a dangerous precedent? Fundamentally, that's the question. So far, people say no. What's your take on it? 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. Taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Brent's giving us a call. Hello, Brent.
Hey, Todd. How's the day treating you?
Well, not bad. You?
Oh, doing all right. So just want to phone in, don't hear a whole lot of people on the pro-bike lane side these days, ones who actually use them. I've been cycling these streets since the Metro Transit went on strike probably, 10 or 12 years ago. I've had a couple of close calls, and I mean, I hear everybody against the bike lane saying, oh, it's going to slow everything down, and I've written out a little something that I'd like to say to everybody who is in opposition of bicycle lanes. And that is, a vote against bike lanes is a vote to put lives at risk for your own convenience. A vote against bike lanes says that you believe that your ability to get somewhere 5, 10, or 15 minutes faster is worth risking my life and the lives of everybody who rides a bicycle. You might not ride, but I can almost guarantee you know someone who does, or at least someone who loves someone who rides. Maybe Bob from accounting's son, your neighbor Sarah, even your cousin that you don't really talk to. How does it feel knowing you fight in favor of risking their lives? How would you feel if someone you knew died or lost someone they loved because of it? Also, you don't need to sit in traffic for a few more minutes. Are you really that selfish?
Well, so I guess, Brent, people would say that the response would be at what cost? How far? What constitutes selfishness?
No, you're right. You're definitely right there. But I mean, I see people blast by me with their side mirror mere inches from my shoulder as I'm biking, just because they need to get past me, and then I creep up behind them at the next red light.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well, Brent,
there is definitely a line.
Brent, if you're driving a vehicle though, and you're behind a bicycle that's going up a hill, and or whether up a hill or not, do you drive a pedal bike or do you have an e-bike?
Oh, a pedal bike.
Okay,
sure,
so
yeah.
pedal bike. So oftentimes you're going well below the flow of traffic, right?
Oh, definitely.
Okay,
it does happen.
Right. So I guess is the expectation that cars would stay behind you? I mean, I don't know that that's realistic to think that cars aren't going to try and get by it.
Oh no, for sure. But I mean, even in the driver's handbook, and the law says to pass when it's safe. Of course, I pull off to the side as often as possible if I see that there's vehicles behind me, and I'm not going to be pinched in between parked cars or risk getting doored. But yeah, it is a little dangerous out there, and bike lanes would make it safer. And I mean, it is a complicated issue.
Yeah.
I will give you that.
Yeah. Okay, Brent. Appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care.
Great...
All right. You got it. 902-405-6000. Ernest. Hello.
Hey, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well. You?
Good. I'm just calling in about what's going on there with the premier and the councillors and stuff. And it is a bit of a slippery slope for him to get involved, but it's not uncommon. I mean, Ontario is doing that type of stuff there now. My biggest thing is that me, as well as everybody that voted for Mayor Fillmore, voted for him on his platform. His platform, one of them, was to put an end to the bicycle lanes. Now, you have the entire city council going against almost everything that our elected mayor has asked to do. That's a problem right there in itself. When you have the majority of the population voting for this man based upon his promises, and he can't keep them due to the councillors. My other issue is we elected these people with no experience, no background. Anybody in the municipality, if you put forward the application and have enough money to do so, can run for city council with no experience, no background. And that's the biggest issue I think we're facing, is that we're putting people in place to make decisions that have zero experience and zero idea of what they're dealing with. I realize that staff, does presentations and suggestions and so forth. But at the end of the day, these people that have no idea, and clearly they have no idea what their constituents want. This is really quite pathetic in my opinion. And so that is why I stand behind the premier getting involved. Because at the end of the day, common sense has to prevail.
But what
it really does.
So what qualifications does the premier have when it comes to these decisions?
Well, I can't really speak to his qualifications.
No, but you're supporting him and his decisions and him stepping in. Yet you're chiding council for not being qualified supposedly to make the decisions. But the premier doesn't have to my knowledge, a degree in urban planning or transportation.
I'm not specifically speaking like urban planning and so forth. I'm regarding politics in itself and how politics runs and how, that type of stuff happens. Not so much in the urban planning, because we all know that even city council isn't the one that comes up with these decisions. At one point, they hired somebody to look at this and come up with it. It's not city council that's sitting there designing bike lanes or where to put them. They hired and, again, wasted more taxpayer monies on doing studies on how and where to do it. but I don't think they are listening to their constituents. Not at all. You might have one area, like in and around the peninsula and stuff, and this is I live in Middle Sackville, and I live right on Highway 1. I have a bike lane in front of my house. I've lived here for 6 years. I've never seen a bicycle on it. Never. So it makes absolutely no sense. What we need to be doing is pushing transit. We need to improve our transit system.
Yeah, that I certainly would agree with. And Ernest, look, I happen to agree with the Premier on fundamentally on the policy that he's supporting here or he opposes. But my question is this a dangerous precedent in an overreach? I suppose that fundamentally is what
it's
because
I don't know. Like is it only an overreach because we're not used to that? Like maybe our political structures do need to change. Maybe the premiers of our provinces should have these kind of powers in place, because we're obviously not putting people in council that are even listening to their constituents. And like one of your previous callers said, Tim Houston doesn't just get involved over something. Like, it takes a lot of people to be upset for him to get involved with something that's going on in a municipality.
Well, that's true.
Let's face it, right?
Yep, that's true.
Okay,
Ernest, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. What is on your mind today? Again, I would say that is politics, though, folks, is that we elect people who generally, don't have qualifications over what they preside. That's the nature of politics, with some exceptions, of course. But oftentimes you have a minister of health, a minister of whatever, agriculture, fisheries, go down the list. There's a lot of them. Veterans Affairs. I'm sure there have been many, many Veterans Affairs ministers federally that have never been a veteran. So that is the nature of politics in and of itself. 902-405-6000. How many prime ministers? What was Justin Trudeau qualified to do? 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Gloria, hello.
Hi, another great day, Todd.
Yeah, not bad.
Todd, excuse me, my voice is not good. I want to to speak about qualifications for a counselor. I spent 27 years in assessment before I ran for council. I was an accredited appraiser. I was director of assessment for Halifax City. So every day I dealt with the general public, either a property owner or a business. I had to go to court many, many times to defend my assessment. But all of that aside, and I had my own business, but all of that aside, I prided myself, Todd, with having common sense. You have to be able to look at whatever it is from all sides. And when I ran, I made two promises. I will stand up for you, and I will be fiscally responsible. And that's what I tried to do. I would be so embarrassed to be a member of this council where I was so dysfunctional that the Premier has to step in. The Premier doesn't want to do this, Todd. The Premier has enough to worry about. But can you imagine the calls and the emails that he must be getting from the constituents of HRM who are not being listened to? So the council, they only have themselves to blame for what is happening. And I will close, Todd, by saying, thank God that the Premier will do this.
Okay, Gloria,
so,
appreciate
Todd,
finish
you
up.
have a great day.
Okay, take care. Thanks for the call, as always. 902-405-6000. Michael, hello.
How are you this morning?
I'm well, you?
Good. I'm calling about the Premier's letter, and I think the context has to be that the Port of Halifax is an economic driver for the whole province, most of the Maritimes, not only Halifax. And it's very apparent Council has not considered that in their traffic flow or bike lane solution. I mean, it's obvious the Premier's concerned because if traffic becomes unbearable for getting containers out locally, and a lot go by train, but there's a lot go by truck, we're going to lose business in the port. And the port is the raison d'etre for Halifax to exist along with the Navy. And that's the reality. And we have to plan to enhance the port facility and transportation out of the port via land. Well, I think the Premier has every right to step in. He has to consider the long-term interests of not only Halifax, but the province when it comes to the port.
Michael, any concern about a dangerous precedent that this might set, or no?
No, because politically, premiers are not going to step in unless it's an important issue, because there'll be massive feedback the next time they go to the polls. Like, I mean, it's the same as this the other issue, like a strong mayor. My concern, I'm of two minds. One concern is we have strong. Look at our Prime Minister. The PMO's office has all the power, more power than cabinet. Backbenchers have zip to say, really. So we have a real strong mayor. His mayor's office will become the center of power and the gatekeepers, which is not good. So if they're going to give the mayor more power, there's got to be some checks and balances.
Okay, Mike, appreciate the call. Take care.
Look, thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Brian, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. The only issue with being on hold for a while is you sit here at a computer and you make notes. So one of the things I wanted to say is I remember voting in the city council, and I don't remember Houston being on the ballot. How about Houston focuses on provincial matters, and maybe he can if he's really upset about congestion downtown, maybe he could do something from a provincial matter instead of interfering with city matters. Maybe he could put some money into transit. That would be much appreciated. Or maybe, just maybe, he shouldn't just arbitrarily send all the provincial workers back to the office at the same time and not expect congestion to increase. I'm not saying take the office workers out of the office, but it definitely contributed. It's ridiculous to think it didn't.
Yeah, that's
also
that's,
the other
that's,
thing is when we have callers call in and say, well, the bike lanes aren't contributing to taxes. I have two cars. I own a house and I own a bike.
Yeah.
I'm still paying my taxes just like everyone else. Like it's silly to think that the people using bike lanes aren't contributing members of society. I pay my taxes just like everyone else. I also don't necessarily use transit a whole lot anymore, but I'm not going to complain about that.
Yeah, I hear. I get your point. I get your point completely. Yeah. And listen, I think that look, I hear what you're saying when it comes to. I think you make a great point when it comes to sending workers back to the office. And by the way, I think it was just non-unionized workers that get sent to the office, which would add to congestion. So that's a valid point.
Well, it just happened to be a comedy of errors. Unfortunately, federal employees and provincial employees all just suddenly went back to the office after working from home. So you have that many more cars on the road.
Yeah.
On top of that, if you're voting for a mayor in Halifax based on their platform, that tells me you don't really understand city council very much. We all knew going into that election that the mayor only had soft powers.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to make suggestions, and if he presents that suggestion correctly, then council will support it. What Andy Fillmore suggested wasn't acceptable. So in the end, Mancini pretty much submitted the same thing with the adjustments required, and city council's already reviewing the bike lanes. Like they can't stop things immediately. I'm positive in those contracts, if the city was to say, you know what, stop all work, there's contractual obligations that the city is now required to fulfill. I'm sure there would be fines and penalties for us to do that. The city council is already reviewing the bike lane overcharging. That happens. Government, unfortunately, is a very, very slow process, and nothing is ever immediate. Also, not all, obviously, you know this, when people call into the radio line or complain online, you don't represent all the constituents. You were just a fraction. Just because Andy Fillmore got a higher percentage doesn't mean he had the majority of all Halifax voices. He just had the majority of the Halifax voices that voted. The councillors who were in support of the bike lanes also got elected. So those constituents are being represented. Also, we're not building necessarily bike lanes for today. We're building bike lanes for tomorrow. We're hoping to make a system that the bike lanes are functional for everybody. So that's going to happen in a few years. You have to be patient. These things take time. And of course, it's terrible that they've gone over budget. The city council's already taking note of that, and they're trying to do something about it. Everything has gone over budget. Has any of these people ever gone grocery shopping? My grocery shopping bill's gone up 3 times, and I'm not buying anything different. It's ridiculous. One last point. How would these people feel if Carney was to come into Nova Scotia and start dictating things? I think the same people that are supporting Houston today would be outraged if Carney was to come to Nova Scotia and start telling Houston what he needs to do and not do.
Okay, Brian, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Matt's giving us a call. Hello, Matt.
Morning, Todd.
Hi.
Hi. Listen, I fully support Premier Houston and what he's doing, and appreciate that he has the courage to step up and take this matter into his own hands at a great political risk to himself, by the way. Does it set a precedent? Is it dangerous? Yes. So let's fight it out in the next provincial election if one of the other parties wants to take an alternative position. But I have lost 100% confidence in City Council. For them to take on a bike lane project that was supposed to cost $25 million, and the cost has escalated to $100 million of our money, and not be willing to put a pause on it, I'm sorry, they've lost my confidence. So I appreciate the Premier and what he's done. And again, it's at risk to his own political standing.
I'm not sure how much risk he'd be taking. I would suggest that he's probably pretty confident that he's got a lot of public support.
Yeah, he does. He does, but it does put himself in a position where he can jump in on the next issue, and that's the issue you've been talking about all morning, and I agree with you. And then if he does, it's a quick path to a bad position for him. I don't think he wants to be here. I think he's doing this begrudgingly.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the call. Take care. All right, 902-405-6000. David, hello.
Good morning, Todd. I was going to be like that guy at being on hold. I'm writing down my notes for the day.
Nice.
I'm all for the bike lane, but not right now. I think they should put that on hold. And we had a big controversy about that when they were going to upgrade the swimming pool. And then they had the segment talking about the homeless, and now we got back down to the bike lane again. There's enough congestion out there as it is because with the road work and all that stuff, we don't really need that right now because what if there was like a fire? All the emergency crews couldn't get in because there's a delivery truck right in the fire zone. And all the buses that are having to travel Dartmouth and Halifax, there's all these cars right in the bus lane. I'm not really against all that too much, but all the trucks got to make their deliveries and all that, right? And same thing with the taxis. But my main concern would be all the emergency crews. Like fire, ambulance, police cars, stuff like that. But the only one that hasn't been really affected by this, Halifax Ferry, because they just go to harbor, right? And they're okay there, but that's my rant for the day.
Okay, pal. Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Patricia, hello.
Good morning, sir.
Hi.
I heard this last week, and of course I waited in line, but I didn't get to say anything, so I'm determined to say it now. That little Bedford beer bar, I'm going to call it, when it was brought up last week, someone, I think it was a spokesman from that area, had said that most of the people that showed up there to have their beer on that sunny day had taken a bus or had walked. And I thought, cool, really good. And then a city councilor decided that there weren't enough parking spots. So these people had to make their area smaller to provide more parking spaces. And I started laughing here at home, almost hysterically, because what this councilor was saying, literally, they want people to drive their cars, park at that little Bedford beer bar, and then drink, and then drive home. So that councilor wants people to drink and drive.
No, that's not true. Patricia, have you ever heard of a designated driver?
Well, when you have people going to all these different bars around the city, and they get in their cars and they drive home because there's not enough police to warrant at every single bar to make people not drink and drive. That's my opinion. That's what they did. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. 902-405-6000. Look, folks, it's like you need a certain amount of parking. I get that, but the idea that people who are driving there are drinking and driving is, I'm sure that, look, does that happen? Of course it happens. But you can say that about any establishment. Look, you could have one person driving 5 people or 4 people and be the designated driver. So anyway, I'm not sure what else to say on that one. 902-405-6000. Buddy's giving us a call. Hello, buddy.
Morning, Todd. How are you doing?
Well, you?
No, not too bad at all. I'd just like to comment on a few things. First of all, they spent $12.7 million on a bike lane across the McDonald Bridge. If that $12.7 million was spent on a little bit of locations for the homeless instead of tents, I think people as a super city might have appreciated it more. Now, there's no reason in the world why those bikes couldn't pedal down to the ferry boat, got aboard the ferry boat, and went across to Dartmouth. They wanted to revamp downtown Dartmouth, but they're bringing the bikes across to No Frills north end. It doesn't do much for revamping downtown. In regards to your councillors, not so long ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, they upped the taxi rate to $6.20. Okay? Casino taxis didn't like that, so they dropped it back to $5.40. So every other taxi stand in the city had to follow suit. The councillors had no say as to what. In regards to our expenses, I've driven taxis since '73 out here. As regards to our expenses, they don't go down; they keep going up. And in regards to the councillors, well, they brought a guy about a week ago said there was 4,000 Ubers in the city, and he couldn't even find a parking spot in a common stand downtown Halifax. Well, I've got 100% agree with him. As per se, us taxi drivers that have driven around Halifax, Dartmouth, we got taken by our councillors because they brought 4,000 vehicles in here with, you don't need a license. All you got to do is be able to drive. And you don't need a roof light for identity. You don't need anything along those lines, and you don't have to go through any sort of a test. You just get in your car and, hey, I'm a taxi or a Hoover driver. Not a taxi driver. We've got to go through a lot of loopholes to become a taxi driver. Criminal checks and whatever else. It's unbelievable how a city would allow something like that to take place. I know I've lived here since 1960. And Gloria McCluskey is number one in what she says. She's not wrong at all anytime she's been on the air, as far as I'm concerned. And that's pretty much all I've got to say to you, Todd.
Okay, buddy.
The time.
All right,
and
take care.
Yep, thank you.
Take care. 902-405-6000. David, hello.
Hi, Todd. Yeah, just regards to Bedford there. I don't think it was the councillor that sort of was upset about not being enough parking spaces. It's a municipal regulation, and that sort of, he had to comply to. And I mean, regulations are slow to change. Yeah, I guess in regards to the councillors, they were recently elected. So isn't it the case that maybe they are representing the majority of their constituents? And something we talked about before, the HRM is a staff-run city, so the HRM hires experts. They develop the policy and then present options to the councillors, who then sort of vote on those policy options kind of from the perspective of, your everyday layperson and stuff. Now, me personally, I don't drive and I don't bike either, so I don't have a lot of skin in this game, but I think an issue is this notion of the suburban core versus the urban core, and that sort of the suburban areas are supporting the urban areas. Well, I think that's largely a myth and not really sort of based on reality. I mean, the urban core obviously is the largest portion of the municipal tax base, so that's the largest share of revenues generated in the urban core. But for instance, around here in the North End, the single family home, many people I know are paying about $7,500 a year in property taxes, where my friend in the sort of suburban area is paying about $1,500 a month. But the other thing to consider is that because of the rent cap, if I bought a home next to my friend, I would actually be paying about 4 to 5 times the amount of property tax that he would. So why is it the case in the city that sort of new home buyers, first-time home buyers, are, carrying the burden of the tax base in this city? But, just an example of municipal costs, where I live in the North End, there are about probably 200 people on my block. So what's the average cost per person per sewage hookup, per water connection, per kilometer of road sort of in front of my house versus a little country road, with a handful of homes along it with sewer, with, paved roads and all that kind of stuff. So, but even take some of the other services like the Canada Game Centre, I'd have to hop on a bus and it would take me about 40 minutes to get there. But I don't know, you could probably drive from downtown or any of those sort of bedroom communities in a car in less than 20 minutes. So, I tend to think that it's a bit of a myth that the suburban area is carrying the urban area. And I think actually the reverse is true. And that's sort of why the HRM was designed as a regional municipality, so that the centre could pay for development in the periphery of the municipality. But just, finally also, I know the federal government rebates a portion of the gas tax to municipalities, but what portion of municipal roads are funded by gas tax, and what portion is a provincial contribution versus coming off of property taxes? So I don't think it's really the case that sort of old car drivers are paying for all the roads and bikes are getting a free ride and stuff like this. I think I'm paying for a lot of roads that I don't really use because I don't drive and I walk to work and it takes me about 5 minutes kind of thing. So, I think that's kind of at the core of it, and it's not really based on a lot of facts. And, I hate to say it, but I think it's possibly a crass sort of political maneuver on Tim Houston's part just to exploit that emotion for, I don't know, future political gain, perhaps if he runs for a prime minister or something like that.
Okay, David, appreciate the call. Take care. Let's talk to Bruce. Hello, Bruce.
Oh, hi there.
Hi.
How are you now?
I'm well.
The good discussions this morning about bike lanes and Moore Street and all that. And I think a lot of these city problems, I've said this before, they go way back into the 1960s, and mistakes were made then that we're paying for. And I want to thank the person who spoke up in defense of the port and how serving the Port of Halifax needs to be a priority, way above a lot of other things. And I used to ride a bike around HRM a lot, and now I can't for a number of other problems. So what about, there's lots of people like me, so we're not getting a break here. Maybe we need more accessibuses. Anyway, that's enough for today.
Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Thanks for the calls, everybody. I didn't get to all of you for that. I apologize. You'll have a chance tomorrow when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12. The Prime Minister's planned cuts include some foreign service, alarming some ex-diplomats. We'll talk to an ex-diplomat about this when we come back. All right, I saw this story from the Canadian press. The diplomats, union, and former ambassadors are raising concerns about Prime Minister Mark Carney's planned cuts to the Foreign Service, just as Global Affairs Canada is looking to expand its presence abroad. Here's a quote from the president of the Professional Association of Foreign Service Officers, It's pretty simple. It's pretty short. It's pretty succinct. It's going to be painful. That's a quote from Pam Isfeld, president, as mentioned, of the Professional Association of Foreign Service Officers. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne sent letters to ministers on July 7th asking them to find savings of 7.5% in their budgets starting the next spring. Later last week, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, said this will include Global Affairs Canada. A quote, "It is necessary for us to find those instances where red tape can be cut and where inefficiencies need to be addressed," she told reporters, adding that the would not speculate on what those cuts would look like. Joining me to talk about this is Gar Pardy, who is a former diplomat and knows this obviously quite well. Gar, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Good morning, Todd.
All right. So what are your thoughts on potential cuts to global affairs?
I guess I've reached an age now where during my career I think it was at least 4 or 5 episodes in the existence of the Foreign Service that involve what's going on right now. It's traumatic for a place like Foreign Affairs because, despite the size of the budget, most of the Foreign Affairs budget is paid for a variety of memberships and organizations, including the United Nations and all of those. So that's where the bulk of the budgets, which basically you can't reduce. Those fees are set by the organizations themselves, and to remain a member, you have to pay up. The rest of the budget is largely people. And so everything that you see or everything with reference to global affairs involves the people that, in effect, either at headquarters or the vast majority, we have over 150 offices in foreign countries. All of them are staffed with Canadians. And, and for a lot of people, the jobs at Foreign Affairs are careers. It's called a foreign service. You come in at a certain level and you stay with them for a number of years. 35 years or even 40 years are not uncommon. And that lifespan or that period basically is based on experience in dealing with the world. And we're going through a policy phase in the Canadian government right now where the fundamental policy that's under review and expansion is how we deal with the rest of the world as a result of what Mr. Trump is trying to do with the bilateral relationship.
When it comes to embassies and our presence abroad, where are we when it comes to years past? Are we less than? Are we more than? Kind of set the framework as to where we are.
Yeah, there's been sort of a slight gradual increase over the last, where there's been an announcement of new embassies being opened. The last one I remember is that we were going to open an office in Fiji. And this is a reflection of sort of the significance of Fiji in Asian Pacific affairs. And of course, all of this is beyond just strictly the trade economic side. An awful lot of it has to do with, in effect, defense policy as well, where, you get Canadian ships, naval ships that are sailing the Taiwan Straits between Taiwan and China. Those kinds of things. And all of those things reflect a political element in terms of what's going on in the world, and you need people on the ground, in effect, to be implementing those kinds of policies and making the arrangements to give effect to those policies.
How about bricks and mortar and embassies? I would think that would be very expensive.
Very expensive, and over the years, I think one of the earlier cutbacks that were made, I think an effort was made was to get rid of places that we owned, and we started to rent spaces in various locations around the world, and that is incredible. That's certainly cheaper, but the cost of people more than anything else. This is why at most of our embassies you will find that the majority of the staff are not from Canada, but they are locally engaged people that we hire at local wage rates. So that has been built into the process over the years, and I think hopefully it reduced cost. But it is still expensive to maintain Canadians in a foreign environment on a career basis, because it's not only the worker, it's the family that goes with it, and all of the associated costs that go with it. So it's a very expensive. Foreign service is an expensive part of government, and I'm not sure the fact that the letter from Treasury Board, or not from Treasury Board, the actual letter was from the Minister of Finance, went out to all government departments, and the departments themselves, I guess, I was speaking with somebody this morning in another associated part of government dealing with the medical science things, and she says they're under the gun as well, where they provide the grants to research for all of us. And she says they're under the same mandate to find savings of 7.5% in the first year. And it's not just the first year, it's the second and third year. And the cuts in the third year, if the program stays in place, is 15%. So you're talking a very serious cut in terms of government expenditures here.
Okay, how much staff would a diplomat have, and might that be impacted? I assume that could be part of where the cuts come from, is staffing
that's
levels?
Where it comes. All of this, it's your personnel costs is really what you're talking about here, as far as foreign affairs are concerned. At a given embassy, you would have maybe 2/3 of the staff at an embassy would be hired locally, 1/3 would be Canadian. But in some places, you might have 1 or 2 Canadians, and then the size of the embassy itself is 5 or 6 other people, so it's relatively small, and it's pretty much gauged to the work that has to be done. Right now you can be assured that the number of people in the embassy in Washington and the number of people in Ottawa dealing with American tariff policy has gone through the roof, just in trying to stay ahead of what Mr. Trump has been up to. And at the same time, in the United States, where the Americans have now detained 55 Canadians whose status in the United States they declare is a criminal status, and they put them in a detention center. They're trying to get rid of them. And all 55 of those people all have families in Canada and are asking for support and services in dealing with the American government, which does not accept any representations whatsoever with regards to these cases.
Okay, when it comes to Canadians living abroad, and depending on obviously where the country is, there would be times when they would rely on embassies, I would think, in foreign affairs and global affairs rather. So tell us about the potential impact on Canadians in a time of need internationally.
Yeah, well, we've just come through a major evacuation of Canadians throughout the Middle East as a result of the sort of the short-term war with Israel and Iran, and the Americans chipping in as well there, and the ongoing war in Gaza and the West Bank, and there's all sorts of Canadians that have associates with that, and in Israel itself, of course, the family connections between other Canadians and people who live in Israel. And this is intensive work at times of war, and you need a lot of people really to do it, just to answer the phone and provide the information that is necessary. And it used to be the easiest place in the world as far as consular work was concerned was in the United States. 1 million Canadians at any given time go off to the United States without a second thought. But that was what we now refer to as BT, before Trump. And things have changed dramatically in the United States with regards to the status of Canadians. Again, it's labor intensive to deal with the problems that arise from this. Even Mexico, there's 1 million Canadians almost a year, or any given time in Mexico, I should say. And so people are going to go to other places. If they don't feel comfortable in the States, they will go to other places. They still travel, and there's going to be problems no matter where they go.
Okay, Gar, appreciate your time. Thanks so much, my friend.
Okay, you're quite welcome, Todd.
All right, take care. You got a Gar Pardy, former diplomat and columnist. Via Rail recently marked the 120th anniversary of its ocean train, but some are asking, what is there to celebrate? That when we come back. CEO of Via Rail says the Crown Corporation wants to use refurbished rail cars to improve service between Halifax and Montreal. He made the comments after a ceremony marking the completion of renovations to Via's Halifax station and noted that last year was the 120th anniversary of the Ocean. The train from Montreal to Halifax inaugurated back in July of 1904. But joining us to talk about all of this is somebody who's, I suppose, a skeptic, a critic of Via Rail. Ted Bartlett, or I should say an advocate, really. Ted Bartlett, past president of Transport Action Atlantic, remains a strong advocate for convenient, affordable, and sustainable public transportation. Joins us to talk about all of this. Ted, thanks for joining the show.
Hi, Todd. Here we go again. Sometimes I think I sound like a broken record, but it's timely to say these things when Via is marking what they say is the 120th anniversary of the Ocean. It's actually the 121st. Well, you can excuse Via for being a little bit late because habitually they are late. The trains are always running behind, and it's not necessarily their fault. But the bottom line is that the Ocean is not the train it used to be. And we don't want to rain on Via's parade here. We're pleased that they did hold an event to celebrate, and we're hoping to see better things. And I'm encouraged by what Via's CEO had to say at the Halifax event. It seems like we are in the same chapter, if not on the same page in many respects. But his hands are somewhat tied. There's not a lot of support from the Government of Canada for the things that he would like to do. And certainly Canadian National Railways is constantly standing in the way of Via, frustrating their efforts to run their trains on time, telling them that they can't have additional slots to run their trains on the freight railways tracks. So there are many, many reasons why the Ocean is not the train it used to be.
Okay, what are the biggest issues right now?
Well, the biggest issue, I guess, is the state of the track in northern New Brunswick. That used to be a 75 mile an hour, and I say miles per hour because railways still run that way. They never were metricized. And it's now restricted in large measure to about 30 miles an hour. The net result, it takes nearly 5 hours longer for the Ocean to travel from Halifax to Montreal than it did 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, arguably, was the Ocean's finest hour because they'd just introduced the classic stainless steel cars that had been thoroughly refurbished. They weren't new, but they were perhaps better than new because they had modern heating and air conditioning systems, improved running gear, new upholstery and carpeting, all that stuff. The dining car had been painstakingly refinished. Chef-prepared meals on board, a high-class dining room on wheels. The train had not one but two scenic dome cars that afforded passengers an excellent view of our maritime scenery. None of that exists anymore, or very little of it. And to make matters worse, even with the lengthened schedule, they can't run the trains on time. There was a train that brought a number of Via dignitaries down from Montreal to Halifax for the event on Tuesday. And it arrived in Halifax about 3 hours late. So I guess it brought home in spades to these Via officials, how inadequate the service is. And there needs to be something done about it. And Via alone cannot cure the problem. There has to be initiative from the Government of Canada. They have to recognize that there is a problem and that there is a chunk of Canada east of Quebec City, and we deserve a fair share of the passenger rail service.
All right, so dealing with the issues of of track which is not in good shape, in good condition. This is track that's owned by private companies, and that is part of the big challenge is how do you deal with that?
Well, I think there are two ways you could approach it. We understand that CN really is a reluctant operator of that track anyway, and would probably like to unload it if the right deal were given. So, one suggested solution is for the federal government to buy that track from CN, turn it over to VIA to operate, and let CN run their freight trains as a tenant. But VIA would be the owner, the primary occupier of the infrastructure, and obviously there would have to be tens of millions of dollars to invested in bringing the infrastructure up to scratch once again, because there's been 30 years of neglect here, and it got to be fixed. But hi, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I just got a beep in my ears.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point being that we need to fix this, and the cost, while it may seem like a big number, isn't really when you compare it with the cost of highway infrastructure that the federal and provincial governments pour billions of dollars every year into. The cost of bringing the Newcastle subdivision, as this piece of track is called, up to snuff, up to the standard it was 30 years ago, is estimated to be less than the cost of twinning 10 kilometers of existing highway. Mm. So in the overall scheme of things, not a big investment. It's a nation rebuilding project, just like the Intercolonial Railway was a nation building project 150 years ago. It's not a billion-dollar mega project, but it's something that this government should do, in all fairness to Atlantic Canada.
Okay, how much concern are you there that, or is there rather that the ocean might completely be scrapped at some point, or do you think that this is as bad as it's going to get 3 a week?
Well, Mario Pelequin has, I think, very positive plans for the ocean. You know, he'd like to put some refurbished stainless steel cars back into service. He suggests that they could return to a daily service, which is one of the keys in our platform. What we would like to see, and I think, honestly, he would like to see it too, but CN is standing in the way, and that should not be allowed to happen. When the governments, and there were both Liberal and Conservative governments involved, privatized CN, and it became an investor-owned railroad in the 1990s, they didn't put in sufficient safeguards for the interests of Canadians. It was all in the interests of the investors. There's got to be shareholder value, they say. Well, how about the former shareholders, the people of Canada? They weren't properly looked after when CN was privatized. And I know it's a little like locking the barn door after the horses escaped, but I think the government owes it to the people of Canada to look back and see what needs to be addressed. What wasn't addressed 30 years ago is causing problems for Canadians today.
Okay, so I guess we're just about out of time, but generally some reason for optimism? Is that kind of what the vibe that I'm getting from you here? Is that correct?
Yeah, there is some reason for optimism. And if only we could get political buy-in. The political will has to be there to do it. And if the Prime Minister or the Minister of Transport says jump, the management of VIA is going to ask how high. They will do what they're told, but I think they genuinely want to do better by Atlantic Canadians. But one hand is tied behind the back here. And without the support of the Government of Canada and without cooperation from CN, it's really very difficult for them to get to first base. The ocean could be easily the train that it was 30 years ago. But it's not going to happen unless the political buy-in is there and unless there's a shake-up in VIA's relationship with CN.
Ted, appreciate it as always. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, take care. Ted Bartlett, past president of Transport Action Atlantic, and remains a strong advocate for the train and convenient and affordable, sustainable public transportation in general. Democracy Watch calling on Prime Minister Mark Carney to sell his investments, including arranging to have Brookfield and other companies buy out his stock options, saying it's the only effective way to end the serious, unethical, and damaging financial conflicts of interest caused by investments in more than 500 companies. Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch when we come back. Democracy Watch calling on Prime Minister Mark Carney to sell his investments, including arranging to have Brookfield and other companies buy out his stock options, as the only effective way to end the serious, as they are calling it, unethical and damaging financial conflicts of interest caused by his investments in more than 500 companies. Joining us to talk about all of this is Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch. Duff, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure.
All right, so unethical, but not illegal, correct? Just to make sure that that I have this correct. This is nothing is, and I'm not saying that to justify anything, but I've had people call the show suggesting that this is illegal. It's not illegal, is it?
No, because politicians have put a gigantic loophole in the ethics rules. The loophole is there in all provincial and municipal ethics rules as well. And it means that the conflict of interest laws really are almost impossible to be in a conflict of interest laws. They don't apply to 99% of the decisions that politicians make and government officials make at the federal level, in every province and territory, and at the municipal level. And they're really just sad jokes, these laws.
Okay, so tell us about what Mark Carney owns and why you think it's problematic, and the blind trust that supposed blind trust, and the screens that are at play here. Just let everybody know, I guess, some of the background here.
Well, Mark Carney owns shares in more than 550 companies, including Brookfield Corporation, which is and Brookfield Asset Management, which are huge, sprawling companies that have subsidiaries in many industries. And he actually owns stock options in those two Brookfield companies that he can't sell for years. In case people don't know what a stock option is, it means you're given shares, but you have to hold on to them. And you can't sell them for years, and it's to give executives the incentive to make the company prosper so that the share price goes up, and when they sell it years later, they make their money then. And so he doesn't have a blind trust because he knows he owns these stock options that can't be sold in Brookfield Corporation and Brookfield Asset Management, and they have interests in multiple industries. He claims to not know whether he owns the shares in 550 plus other companies, but it's highly unlikely that a trustee that he has chosen and that he has been able to give it initial instructions to, such as don't sell anything, has sold a lot of those shares. So it's just a sham. The blind trust isn't blind at all. And then he supposedly has this so-called ethics screen, which only applies to 103 of the more than 550 companies he's invested in. And that's a loophole-filled, unethical, secretive smokescreen that allows Mark Carney, because of this huge loophole in the federal ethics law, allows him to participate in and hide that he's participating in almost every decision that affects the companies in which he is invested. So it's a completely unethical, dishonest, secretive scheme. And the fact that Mark Carney is okay with this shows that he has a deeply unethical attitude. And that's a dangerous person to have in the Prime Minister's chair.
Is Mark Carney the most, I guess, the wealthiest prime minister of all time, or?
We don't know that because we don't know the value of investments, and this kind of disclosure didn't even happen before the mid-'90s, and so who knows what prime ministers and cabinet ministers.
I guess what I'm getting at is that this is a guy that probably has more investments and more tentacles into this type of thing than than most prime ministers would have had, though, right? I think that's safe to say.
Paul Martin's probably the closest, and then he owned a huge shipping company that had subsidiaries as well around the world. And he's the one that put this loophole into the law. It was a code back then. Mm-hmm. And Prime Minister Harper promised to close the loophole so that you would actually have to step aside if you had even the appearance of a conflict of interest. He broke that promise. And Prime Minister Trudeau had a trust that he said was worth $2 million invested in various companies. He didn't even disclose which companies he was invested in, because what you can do, and what Mark Carney could have done, it's actually legal to do this, is just set up a shell numbered business corporation and then put all the investments under that shell and then hide it from the public. And that's all that Trudeau did. He just said, I own this numbered company. And it was actually a trust, and he had chosen the trustee, given the trustee instructions, and it hid what he was invested in. And the media just rolled over on it. It was just as much of a scandal as Mark Carney's investments. And people should be aware as well that Pierre Poilievre has investments as well, and is sitting there in a minority government with a lot of power as opposition party leader, and able to vote and push for things that would help himself and profit as well, as much as Carney is. So it's an ongoing scandal. The system really is the scandal, and it's not surprising that it produces these kind of scandalous situations, really, where Mark Carney, in pretty much any decision that he makes concerning businesses in his term as Prime Minister, or any discussion he participates in or vote, he's going to have a financial conflict of interest. It's legal, but it's completely unethical. And again, the fact that he's okay with this completely unethical, secretive scheme that actually hides that he's going to participate in all these votes that he can profit from shows a deeply unethical attitude.
Okay, so if he were to divest and sell everything, would there be tax implications here for him? I would think that would be, and not to say that that's not a good enough reason not to, but I guess what I'm getting at is that the argument that I've heard made out there that this might be a disincentive for people like Mark Carney to get into public office, or people who have investments if they had to sell everything because for taxation reasons or whatever. What's your thought? What's your counter to those who say that this would be a disincentive to get good people into public office?
If you're a good person, you want to serve the public, why do you want to have financial conflicts of interest where every single decision you make can be questioned as to whether you're making it to profit yourself or to protect the public interest? Like, if you want to serve the public, then serve the public and cut your ties to businesses. That's what Mark Carney said when he launched his leadership bid for the Liberal Party. He said, I've cut ties to every company. No, he hadn't. He left the boards of companies. He stopped working for them, but he was still invested in them. So that's a financial conflict of interest, the worst kind of conflict of interest. So you're not a good person if you want to be in there with all these investments where you can make decisions to profit from them. No one should want people like that in public office. And it's little hardship to them as well. First of all, when you're Prime Minister, Cabinet Minister, top government official, you have a salary in the top 1 to 5% of annual salaries that Canadians earn. You have among the most generous benefits and pension plans of any employees in Canada. You sell your investments, yes, you'll pay tax on the gains, but you would have to do that anytime you sell them in the future under the capital gains tax. But you could then buy government bonds or guaranteed investment certificates or other similar financial products that are just like accounts at banks or bonds that are not connected to any specific business and that offer a fixed rate of interest for the time period you're in office. And then when you leave, you can reinvest again in businesses and mutual funds and other financial products. Mark Carney could actually have, there's a huge loophole, he could actually have millions of dollars of other investments in mutual funds. That doesn't even have to be disclosed under the federal ethics law. Another huge loophole in the law where he can actually hide those investments. He's had to disclose them to the ethics commissioner, but not to the public. So it's just a completely unethical law. He said he's fine with it and sees no problem with the law, and he's also completely fine with this unethical scheme where he could profit from many of the decisions he'll make about business as well.
Can you give me an example of Duff? Sorry to interrupt you, but can you give me an example of? I'm not being argumentative. I just want for people listening to understand this better, and myself. How might decisions that he make potentially feather his nest based on what he knows he owns as far as stocks go?
Well, two ways. Any company's invested in, if he does nothing, he can even help the company by not regulating them in the way that consumer groups, environmental groups, labor groups, health and safety groups are advocating that the company be regulated. Beyond that, he can change a law or regulation in a way that will save that company money or help them make more money. The stock price will go up and the value of his shares will go up, and he'll make money. So there's so many more than 550 companies, including Brookfield, which is a huge conglomerate of companies. He's invested in them. So almost every decision he makes that affects businesses, he will have a direct financial conflict of interest that he knows about while he's making the decision.
Okay, I've heard that Brookfield it's got a lot of tentacles within the economy, modular housing and heat pumps and other things, and some have suggested that his policy on perhaps EV mandates or whatever might be swayed by this. What are your thoughts on that?
He's already made decisions that affect his interests. He cut the carbon tax. Well, Brookfield Corporation is involved in industries that produce carbon. So he's already done it. And he's allowed to. Again, there's a huge loophole. As long as you're making a decision that applies generally, you're allowed to participate in the decision even if you have a financial conflict of interest. 99% of the decisions that the Prime Minister, cabinet ministers, and top government officials are involved in and make are decisions that apply generally. So the law that says you can't participate in a decision when you have a conflict of interest does not apply 99% of the time because of this huge loophole. And that's why it really should be called the Almost Impossible to Be in a Conflict of Interest Act. And again, that same loophole is in all the provincial laws and municipal ethics codes across the country. And it just guts the law entirely. So people are going to be saying, and people often say to me when I've raised this in the past, well, tell me one decision they made that really helped themselves or the business. Again, you can do nothing and help a business by not regulating them in a way that will increase their costs of operating because you're protecting consumers or the environment or communities or workers. And by not regulating them, you're helping them. And they make more money as a result. So through inaction as well as through action, politicians and top government officials can help companies that they're invested in. And that's why it's so dangerous to allow this. And that's why back in 1987, Justice Parker of the Parker Commission, who was looking into a federal royal commission looking into conflicts of interest, recommended that top politicians and government officials be required to sell all their investments and that blind trusts be banned because they're just an ineffective sham that hides conflicts of interest and doesn't actually resolve them. Prime Minister Carney has as many financial conflicts of interest as Trump. So if you're concerned and say, oh, I can't believe Trump, all these decisions he's making to help his own family's companies, and you're concerned about that, well, you're being hypocritical if you're not also concerned about Carney, who's going to be doing exactly the same thing, as wide open and legal, completely unethical, but legal for him to make all sorts of decisions that can profit himself and his friends and his family as well, because the loophole extends to any kind of businesses his friends or family are involved in as well.
Okay, Duff, appreciate your time. Thanks so much as always.
Thank you, and I'll keep you up to date. I'm sure we'll see many examples of him taking in part in decisions where he can profit from the decision. I don't know why he's going to let this scandal hang over him every single decision he makes. So during his term as Prime Minister, it's going to shatter the public's trust in Carney. It's a very bad and really unintelligent decision of him to make.
Okay, thanks, Duff. Appreciate it. Take care. Duff Conacher, founder of Democracy Watch. Nova Scotia's second Farmers Market week goes next week. We'll get to that when we come back. The second ever Nova Scotia Farmers Market Week goes next week. Joining me to discuss all this is Justin Cantafio, Executive Director of Farmers Markets of Nova Scotia. Justin, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Hey, good afternoon, Todd. Thanks for having me.
All right, so this is something that I did not know. Nova Scotia has the most farmers markets per capita in Canada, so obviously a lot of interest here, right?
Yeah, no, we have a thriving farmers market sector, and we have well over 40 farmers markets across the province in our cooperative. So, I mean, I don't think you could be further than a 30-minute drive from a farmers market anywhere in this province.
All right, tell us more about what people can expect next week.
All right, well, next week, kicking off on Monday, we have well over 35 events happening during Farmers Market Week across the province. We've got farmers markets in every nook and cranny of the province taking part, and basically it's just a celebration of our beautiful and thriving farmers market sector right here in Nova Scotia, highlighting small business owners, spreading awareness about just how important it is to support local and supporting our local economy and food systems. Hopefully, stirring up some interest in drawing new folks to the farmers market for the first time who might experience the abundance and the joys that their farmers market offers. And of course, a great opportunity to come celebrate people and place, and maybe reacquaint yourself with eating with the seasons. I mean, these farmers markets are bursting at the seams this time of year with all sorts of awesome seasonal products and produce. So, yeah, we've got really exciting events. There are things like picnics in the park, cake raffles, giveaways. Each market's kind of putting on their own little special event to celebrate both new customers, their existing customers. And farmers markets are already an awesome thing. And, throwing in family days, bringing in bouncy castles, bringing in clowns, bringing in all sorts of events just makes farmers markets even that much more exciting this week.
Yeah, and of course, the local supply chain and all that. If it bolsters up local and buying local, that's a great thing, right? It achieves a lot of good things here.
Totally, absolutely. Let's be clear. Like, farmers markets are in fantastic spaces. You go to them, you feel awesome, you feel connected. That in and of itself is a beautiful service that farmers markets provide. But they're no slouch either. I mean, in a time when less than 15% of the food we consume in this province is locally sourced, a farmers market, especially in our cooperative, is a place where you can guarantee everything that you buy there is made, baked, or grown right in Nova Scotia. So your dollars are going directly towards supporting local. A lot of people are walking around with their elbows up. They're wondering, what do I do next? Well, come to the farmers market. For example, we were just doing the math. If next week, if every adult in Nova Scotia went to a farmer's market and spent just $20, then we can invest more than $15.7 million into our farmers, producers, and makers right here in Nova Scotia. So, I mean, every little bit counts, and farmers markets are a great place. They're where we are still able to find our local producers, where we can still connect with our farmers, and where we can still kind of guarantee that when we spend our dollars, they're going into our own communities instead of disappearing into some offshore bank account. So, I mean, in a time of tariffs, in a time of all sorts of scary stuff happening geopolitically, this is a great place to reconnect with your community, reconnect with your food shed, and spend those dollars wisely in a way that makes you feel good while also getting access to awesome local food and goods.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, there's lots going on. You mentioned everything that's going on. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find all the details if they want to get the details and they want to take part? Because I'm sure many listening now would be inspired to do so.
Absolutely. Well, I hope so. So, folks, go to our website. It's farmersmarkets with an S, novascotia.ca. Right there, you'll find a list of all of our farmers markets and a map to find out all their location. But if you go to farmersmarketsnovascotia.ca/events, you'll go to our dedicated events portal that lays out all the different farmers markets week events that are going on by day, and then you can scroll down and find out what each event is. There's information. I'm looking at the Barrington Farmers Market, for example. They've got Bouncy Castle, they've got Bubbles the Clown there. Scrolling down, I'm seeing that there's all sorts of fun stuff happening everywhere from Digby to Fairview, down to Kingston and the Valley. There is going to be an awesome event in your neighborhood. So, yeah, farmersmarketsnovascotia.ca/events is where you'll get all that information.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. Have a great week.
Thank you. You as well. Thanks, Todd. Take
All
care.
right. You take care. Justin Cantafio, Executive Director of Farmers Market of Nova Scotia. Here's a story that we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Municipal police chiefs in Nova Scotia are questioning the provincial government's plan to expand the services of the RCMP as part of a push to restructure and modernize policing in the province. And we will be talking about this tomorrow when the New Glasgow Regional Police Chief joins us, Ryan Leal. So we'll get his take on this. And again, controversial for sure. Paul Palango has certainly talked a lot about it. And perhaps we'll reach out to Paul and chat with Paul about this tomorrow, or rather next week, as well as a follow-up. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Ness on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job as always. Have yourself a great day. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.